Hi everyone, it's Kathy. Thank you so much for joining me. Today I'll be creating a card using the new I Scream stamp set, the Honey Drips Stencil, and the Wonky Stitched Rectangle dies. I'll be doing some reverse masking for my background, and I'll share a tip with you on how to create a bunch of masks really fast. I started out with a piece of Nina Classic Crest cardstock, and it measures 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. I used VersaFine Onyx Black ink and just randomly stamped the ice cream cone all over that background. And when stamping a background, I like to stamp off the edge and turn the stamp every which way. It just gives it a little bit more of an organic look. After I was done with the stamping, I set that panel aside, and then I started to work on creating my masks. For my masks, I stamped the image using Memento Tuxedo black ink onto a stack of sticky notes. I have a stack of 3 sticky notes there, and then I grabbed another stack of 3 sticky notes and stamped the image 2 more times. So a couple of things. The first thing is I switched over to the Memento Tuxedo black ink for my masks because I'll be doing some ink blending and I don't want the ink to smear. And sometimes if you don't let the VersaFine dry long enough, it can smear. The second thing is, there's another way to do this. If you have a Brother Scan and Cut machine, you can just stamp the image multiple times on masking paper and have the machine cut it out for you. But if you don't have a Brother Scan and Cut, you can do it this way, and you'll see here that I created 12 masks pretty quickly by stacking up the sticky notes. When cutting out a mask by hand, you do want to make sure that you cut very close to the stamped line, if not on the stamped line, even just a little bit. That way you won't end up with a white halo around your image when you do the ink blending over the masks. The other thing is, when using the sticky note method here, you want to make sure that you keep your sticky notes lined up so that the masks truly are the same size. The next thing that I did to make sure that the mask was sticky from top to bottom is I grabbed a piece of scratch paper, I separated the sticky notes, and then on the back side I used my Zig two-way glue pen and added more adhesive to the back. The nice thing about the Zig two-way glue pen is that it does become repositionable after it dries. You just want to make sure that the glue dries completely before you place it on your stamped panel as a mask. If you apply it too soon, it will become a permanent glue. The other thing that I like to do is rub the glue on my hand to try and get rid of some of the tackiness if it's too sticky, just to make sure that my cardstock doesn't tear. So once the two-way glue was dry completely, I put all of those masks in place and started to do a little bit of ink blending. I started with Twisted Citron and a mini ink blending tool, and I just randomly added the ink, and I'm not trying to get a perfect blend. I just kind of wanted to have the Twisted Citron in some places, and then when I'm done with the Twisted Citron, I switch over to Lucky Clover, again using the mini ink blending tool. And it is at this point when I realized I should have used a makeup blending brush instead, because one of those masks kept lifting up a little bit because of the mini ink blending tool. Anyway, after I was done with the Lucky Clover ink, I switch over to a makeup blending brush and come back in with the Twisted Citron and add a little bit more ink. And it was definitely easier to blend the ink with the brush. And then I came back in with the Lucky Clover and added a little bit more. And that one mask is still giving me problems. It keeps lifting, but that's okay. Anyway, after I was done with the splotchy ink blending, I grabbed the Honeycomb Drips Stencil because I wanted to add some green goo to the background. So I used the Twisted Citron ink again, and for this I'm actually coming in with a pretty heavy hand. And the drips aren't really very noticeable, but I noticed that once the ink dries completely, they dry back a lot, so you can see them a little bit more once the ink is completely dry. After I was done with the ink blending, it was time to remove the masks to reveal my reverse masked background. And then I set that panel off to the side to let it dry completely. Next, I stamped the ice cream cone onto a piece of Cougar Super Smooth cardstock with Memento Tuxedo black ink so that I could do some Copic coloring. And the coloring that I did was really very simple. I started with YR24 and added that around the outer edges of the ice cream cone, and then underneath that gooey drippy part on the front of the ice cream cone. Then I came in with Y23 and blended that out a little bit, and I did make sure to leave a center highlight on the cone part just to give it more of a round appearance. Once I was done with the Y23, I came in with Y21 and blended that out. And then I came back in with the YR24 to deepen up some of those shadows, and then I finished up with Y32. I'll have all of the Copic colors that I used listed over on my blog, and the link for that blog post will be in the description box below. For the ice cream, I started with YR31, and I added the YR31 around the outer edges of the ice cream, and then I concentrated it underneath the gooey drippy parts. After I was done with the YR31, I came in with YR30 and blended that out. After I was done coloring in the ice cream, I started to color in the drippy goo, and I started with YG03 and added that mostly at the bottom of the drippy goos or at the back of the little eyeball parts of the ice cream where it would be the darkest. Then I blended that out with YG01, and then I came back in with YG17 just to add in some much deeper and darker shadows. And I did go around the irises of the little eyeballs that are on the ice cream cone and decided that I needed to color those in purple. So I started with V12 and colored the entire iris with V12. Then I came in with V15 to add some shading around the outer edge of the iris and blended that out with V12. Decided that I still needed a bit darker color at the bottom edge of those irises, so I came in with V17 and added that just along the bottom, and then blended that out with the V12. So to finish up the card, I did run the ice cream cone through my scan and cut machine to cut it out for me. I cut a white rectangle using the Wonky stitched rectangle dies, and then I cut a piece of black cardstock just slightly larger so there would be a small border around that. For the sentiment, I stamped and embossed it with white embossing powder onto a piece of black cardstock, and then I cut it apart so that I could have separate strips to go along the left side of my ice cream cone. I did trim the background panel down just a little bit so that there would be a black border around it when I adhered it to the front of the card. And my card base is an A2 size top folding note card from black cardstock. And then to add some super gooey fun, I used some glossy accents and filled in all of the irises of the eyeballs. And I added a little bit of shimmer to the gooey drippy stuff with my Wink of Stella glitter pen. And that's it. That finishes up my card for today. Thank you so much for joining me. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you've not yet subscribed, we'd love it if you would. And don't forget to ring the bell so you're notified every time a new video is posted. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.